Bonjour, welcome to the Hawkeye Rising YouTube channel. Thank you for joining me. It's going to be a little bit different today. I'm going to be calling this show part 3.1. Not jumping ahead to part 4 yet with Jacques Cartier's study and first contact with Kanata. Today I'm going to be reading actually from portions from Eaters of Children, the Pedocracy Exposed, How Access to Power is Granted Through the Rape, Torture, and Ritualistic Slaughter of the Innocent by Johnny Cirucci. I decided to read a small portion of this because I believe this is another lens, another filter, if you will, to the information that I am going to continue to share as far as what happened, specifically Jacques Cartier's voyage number 2 and number 3 to the New World. I think it's important to have an understanding. Anyway, let's begin. I had the privilege to proofread Eaters of Children for Johnny back in 2017. The book was published September 11th, 2017. I'll leave an Amazon link down below in the notes. Take a look. Note the reviews. It's not an easy read, nor should it be. At the same time, I also want to add that this was my only published poem is in the introduction. And I'll begin with this. What we will have to give an account for are works in blood-purchased freedom, to the one who paid in full the debt of all that occurs in dark corners, to those that know and those who do not. Mourn and weep. The children are naked and are being devoured. Still in the introduction. According to Hesiod, the Titan Cronus so lusted after... Let's try that again. The Titan Cronus so lusted for power that he castrated his father Uranus, then married his sister Rhea, and reigned with her as king and queen. When it was prophesied that one of his own children would dethrone him, he began devouring them as they were born. In Roman mythology, Cronus was adopted and renamed Saturnus, a title with roots in the Hebrew Satan. To the preface. How could they keep a conspiracy secret? Of course we went to the moon. Of course Lee Harvey Oswald fired 3 shots from an antiquated 6.5mm bolt-action Mannlicher... Oh boy, I wish I could pronounce that. Mannlicher Carcano from 200 yards away in 8.3 seconds, blowing off the back of President Kennedy's head, or shooting from behind him. What you are about to read in these pages will forever put to bed any notion of normalcy, trust in your major institutions, or ease of sleep that you ever had. A system of evil controls your government, your military, your law enforcement, your judges, and even your entertainment that is so vile, the details of it may very well leave you catatonic. It is, quite literally, of biblical proportions. Multiple citations are not redundantly attributed, but the bibliography is meticulous and exhaustive. It was my intent to give you all the tools you would need to verify my work and pick up where I left off. I've maintained hyperlinks, color, and a few highlights for digital versions of this book. In dealing with these issues, I will frequently rely upon my own Christian faith for moral references as well as passages from the Bible to validate my positions. In no way do I wish to alienate non-Christians, as this information is for anyone who lives as a slave under the current system of secret oppression. That's about 99% of you. The foreword, fantastic foreword, was written by Doc Felipe. Gives us a brief testimony, but also some very, very potent facts, examples, thoughts, ideas. I begin. Growing up as a Seventh-day Adventist, I was quickly introduced to the concept that the Roman Catholic Church was some sort of devilish cult. Grandma would shout, "Beast," as soon as the Pope appeared on TV, usually to address and or condemn any random act of violence happening in the world. Of course, at the time I gave little to no importance to what the old man dressed in white had to say, if only I knew. Time passed and my heart was continually hardened as I made my way through the godless system of our secular education. Even the daily Bible readings I had with my parents as a child felt silly and vague by the time I was in college. It seemed that the fears of Martin Luther concerning the universities turning into gates to hell were indeed true. The world, or more precisely, the devil's simulation, had successfully convinced me that all I had ever learned about God was based on fairy tales, moral stories, not to be taken literally, by destiny or by God's plan. I decided to move to the United States, as many Latinos do, in search of a better life. Digging for the truth was in no way part of my plan. However, as I started browsing countless conspiracy theory websites and watching even more YouTube videos on the topic, my view of the world radically changed. All the sudden names like Rockefeller, Rothschild, and Bilderberg popped up on my radar, and I thought I had everything figured out. It's the Jews. Well, not all of them, just the bad ones. But at this stage, I came across an interview with a researcher named Johnny Cirucci. I never heard of him before, anyway, around the truth community, but decided to give him a chance, not knowing at the time that particular interview would change my life forever. Johnny was exposing with sources and citations what could easily be tracked, who was really responsible for the endless war on terror, 9/11, the Kennedy and Lincoln assassinations, and more. He proved that, to this very day, all roads lead to Rome. More precisely, they lead to the Vatican and the Jesuits. As a result, I reached out to Johnny, and to my surprise, he got back to me. Anyone that ever spent time researching these topics knows that it's not the norm. Soon enough, I was tracking for myself the Catholic or Jesuits in the woodpiles of many prominent people in the world. From politics to entertainment, I was able to find the Catholic connections with no effort. It's like they were there all the time, but only at that moment I had acquired the proper glasses to see past the numerous distractions. Practically, what started out as a hobby evolved into a volunteer job. The peak of our collaboration was a program Johnny and I did together, in which we re-examined the infamous Franklin cover-up that took place in Omaha, Nebraska, and surfaced publicly in the late 80s. The information we gathered on this case alone was impressive. More astounding was the fact that it's never been exposed the way it should. Did you know that Lawrence E. King Jr., then high-level Republican official and manager of the Franklin Federal Credit Union, procured boys to be abused by the elite from Boys Town, a Catholic nonprofit organization supposedly dedicated to care for children? How did such an organization manage to brilliantly disassociate itself from this story? Could it have been the fact that the lead perspective in the case, John DeCamp, studied in a Catholic monastery as a boy intending to be a priest? Or the fact that DeCamp was the lawyer for Monsignor Robert Hupp, the overseer of Boys Town at the time? Do you think that Hupp's actions at Boys Town contributed to him being nominated as a representative to the United Nations on behalf of the children? Why did the FBI try to intimidate Alicia Owen, one of the victims? Why did it do whatever it took to cover up the pedophilia allegations? Is it possible that their interests are not aligned with those of the American people? It's my opinion that the Boys Town cover-up, as it should be named, redirected our attention towards exposing the underbelly of the world system, namely the rape and torture of kids and young adults. It wasn't for the sake of devious pleasure alone, but as a requirement to anyone who wished to acquire power and influence, hence the quote-unquote pedocracy. Recent developments in the case, brought to light by the mainstream and alternative media as Pizzagate, prompted common people to research this dark subject. However, as well-intentioned as well-intentioned as a person can be, their efforts will lead to little results without knowing the root cause of the problem. As Red Skull stated in the movie Captain America, the First Avenger, cut off one head and two more shall take its place. In a world where it's convenient to find information anywhere, disinformation agents and opportunists can be found in hordes. Who is to blame? Is it the Republicans or Democrats? Or perhaps it is the bankers. How about the Satanists? The blame is cleverly shifted to fit the bias of each individual. Let's add Illuminati, globalist, so on and so forth, and pick your vacuous name. In the face of these odds, Johnny took upon himself the task of going against this terrible Babylonian hydra that has been feeding off of our children since the beginning of time. As a true Protestant of his age, Johnny exposes the Roman Catholic Church and its special forces, the Jesuits, as the foundational structure through which the devil has built and runs his simulation. In contrast to the movie Spotlight, which only focuses on the Diocese of Boston and treats the problem as a recent one, you will learn that pedophilia in the priesthood is endemic and rampant throughout the world. Moreover, this behavior is not only tolerated but encouraged and can be traced back to the origins of the papacy as it incorporated its philosophy from the Babylonian and Roman empires that came before it. Johnny really goes deep into the rabbit holes to explore the Catholic connections behind Jimmy Savile, Charles Manson, Dr. Alfred Kinsey, Jeffrey Epstein, Johnny Gosch, and the Maddie McCann abduction, as well as many others. They are all the tie-ins that were meticulously covered up or purposely ignored by agents of the Whore of Babylon in order to erase her tracks. This is a book that perhaps none of us would like to write, but it's paramount that this information comes to light. The information comes to light as the rape, torture, and murder of kids is ongoing. Even though it's our firm belief that we're entrusted with this knowledge and charged to act upon it by the Lord, Jesus Christ, it should be the duty of every man, Christian or non-Christian, to care for the well-being of women and children. The Bible commands us to have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. That's from Ephesians 5:11 and 12. It also guarantees us that Christ, upon his return, will break them in pieces, from Daniel 2:34. And their system shall be thrown down and shall not be found forevermore, referencing Revelation 18:21. It's also worthy to remember that if you're a Roman Catholic, Jesus has lovingly called you to come out of her, lest you share in her sins and lest you receive her plagues, from Revelation 18:4. It's impossible to tell all the stories of countless victims of Luciferian abuse in one work, but at this time it's the best we can do with the resources we have available. With this work, we show that we care for the little ones and exhort you to do the same as we patiently await the right time given by the Lord to take the next step and physically stand against evildoers. Trust us, the time is coming. I thank God for the opportunity to have met Johnny and the rest of the team. We will drive on as there is no coming back once you know the truth. If you haven't already, it's my hope that you will experience the same, and if possible, take the Lord with you in this journey. Signed, your Huckleberry, Doc. I want to go back actually to the acknowledgements and read a sentence. This is Johnny speaking. I credit the Lord Jesus Christ with the ability to see what others could not, or because of their cowardice, refused to. And adding, I have reached out to nearly every one of note in the alternative media community and have been shunned by each and every one. Felipe Robles came to me. Since then, his research, writing, and aid have become foundational to my efforts to expose the great harlot, and I am honored to have him write the foreword to this expose. Chapter 1. The Devil's Simulation. Approximately 29 AD, the temptation of Christ. Again the devil took him up on a very high mountain, and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their grandeur, and said to him, all these things I will give you if you will fall down and worship me." Then Jesus said to him, "Begone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve." Then the devil left him, and immediately angels came and ministered to him. From Matthew 4:8-11. Certainly in our spinning globe earth modern reality, such Bible passages seem quaint, perhaps even ridiculous. But what if some version of the devil's narrative, remembering that he is the very father of lies, were accurate? Perhaps he has utilized whatever advantages he retained as an interdimensional entity along with those loyal to him, and conducted a malignant version of the game Sims, slowly building empires from the ground up and giving his most trusted lieutenants control over principalities. Perhaps God allowed this to take place for several reasons. One, he places restrictions upon his interventions to guarantee free will is granted to his created beings. Two, the malignancy of the empires created by the devil are used by God to test and refine his children, to perfect them as companions for his Son. Three, he has pity for the angelic beings that do not receive the opportunity for redemption that human souls have. Four, he is giving those who choose to participate enough rope to hang themselves as a testimony to his justice. If true, does this put the words of Jesus to Pontius Pilate in a different light? "My kingdom is not of this world," from John 18:36. The Greek cosmo, translated as world, has an interesting double meaning to include adornment or trappings. Is there a hidden metaphor that implies a malignant system at work, the devil's empire building simulation? How can Christ be King of kings and Lord of lords, and yet not rule in this world? Was Jesus giving Pilate a false sense of security by actually saying, "That which empowers me is not the system which has elevated you"? This further makes sense in light of the assertion that all of creation was made through Christ and for him. If true, then the devil's simulation would be a tenuous parasite controlling God's creation. As a fallen angel, he has the handicap of needing to co-opt human hands to do the work for him. He would need a system that ensured the loyalty of anyone he empowered. It would be a system that guaranteed any human he used would someday share in his judgment. Those who choose loyalty to God would be known by partaking of his nature, compassion and selfless love. The devil would force his followers to show their allegiance by going as far in the opposite direction as possible. Lust of any kind, feeding self-interest, creating a callous, inhuman monster. That is exactly what history shows. The Bible states that the first rebellion by man against God was led by Nimrod in Babylon. Historian Alexander Hislop wrote in his epic expose of the Catholic Church, The Two Babylons, that Nimrod, also known as Ninus, was executed by Noah's son Shem, the progenitor of the Hebrew race, for apostasy. His body was cut into pieces and sent to the four corners of the earth as a warning to anyone who might follow after him. Thus began the deification and mythologizing of rebellion against God via a methodology so powerful it seems almost certainly to have come from a source outside our time-space continuum. The Greek titan Prometheus was said by the poet Hesiod to have stolen fire from Olympus to give to man. Furious with him, Zeus bound him to a rock amongst the mountains in the Caucasus, where an eagle pulls out and devours his liver daily, as the immortal Titan's organ regenerated each night. Prometheus is considered by the powerful elite to be a metaphor for Lucifer, the light bearer, and fire is likened to the secret knowledge and power Lucifer bestows upon his worshippers. Although the average rational adult sees such myths as laughable, the Luciferian elite believe them to be the reality which guides their every move. Jumping ahead, their legends had the wife of Nimrod executed and dismembered by Noah's son Shem for his rebellion against Yahweh. Semiramis seek out his body parts to reassemble him. Unable to locate his genitals, some stated she fashioned them herself. others that the fish god Dagon pulled them from the water for her. She then applied sex magic, designated by occultist Aleister Crowley as magic with a K on the end, and impregnated herself with the child of promise. Her husband reincarnated and renamed Tammuz. This sex magic is conjured with the architecture of the Vatican, an obelisk or phallus across from a dome or womb. The Egyptian version of the legend of Nimrod has a fascinating twist. The good god Osiris, or Nimrod, is murdered by his evil brother Set, or Shem, while his wife Isis, or Semiramis, manages to conceive his son Horus with him, posthumously. It is this undead body part of Osiris that sprouts up the many obelisks around the world, and the most significant of them are erected across from the dome structures that represent the womb of Isis. This pattern was cunningly duplicated by Roman Catholic Freemason Pierre Charles L'Enfant for Washington, District of Columbia, and finalized with the greatly exaggerated phallic obelisk of architect Robert Mills. The mother goddess has taken on many forms through the centuries, Columbia being one of the more recent versions. What has been consistent, however, has been the connection to debauchery, fixation on reproduction, and proof of dedication by causing the innocent to suffer. These are all foundational to the devil's simulation. In Greece, the mother goddess Cybele was honored in such fashion. The most iconic example of blood sacrifice to Cybele was the most iconic example of blood sacrifice to Cybele was the slaughter of a bull upon her altar, known as the Taurobolium. The consort of Cybele was Attis, a youth who was so dedicated to her that he cut off his own genitals in her service. The voluntary or involuntary castration of young men became a key part of pagan rites. Such boys were presented to kings as cowed servants, guaranteed not to interfere with royal harems. These abominable practices go back to the dawn of civilization. In Rome, worship of Cybele was said to give priestesses the ability to attain great knowledge or see into the future, a process known as the Sibylline oracle. The Phrygian cap worn by Attis and Mithras was seized upon by the Luciferian elite who manipulated the revolutions of the 18th century in America and France. Maintaining the Templar duality of their icon, the two-headed Roman eagle, the Phrygian cap was rebranded as a symbol of freedom. If the uninitiated asked any questions, they were told it was the cap worn by emancipated Roman slaves. There was little danger the uneducated masses would connect the dots to satanic debauchery and brutality, though such was the fruit of the French Revolution in particular. You can even name your artwork The Furies of the Guillotine, and the masses still wouldn't understand. The Furies were vicious goddesses of vengeance, birthed when Cronus castrated his own father Uranus and cast his genitalia into the sea. They arose from the resulting foam to torment their victims mercilessly. Who has preserved the satanic system, the devil's simulation, into modern times? A surprising source, the Roman Catholic Church. Although there have been several orders of knights, priests, and nuns who have served the Church in this endeavor, none have rivaled the inversely named Society of Jesus, founded by Ignatius de Loyola in 1534. They had been ruefully named the Jesuits, Jesuita, are you Jesus-like? It is meant as an ironic accusation, as the company specializes in any method necessary to further the hegemony of the keepers of the devil simulation, from war to assassination to blackmail to organized crime like trafficking in narcotics and human beings. The guillotine was invented by a Jesuit priest and professor, Dr. Joseph Ignace Guillotin. The Jesuits are equally responsible for the American Revolution as they are the French Revolution. Jumping ahead. As the sources below attest, the Jesuits have been involved in and even spearheaded many of the world's worst wars, revolutions, and massacres. At times, the Jesuits are directly involved. At other times, they use their influence over the Freemasons and other secret societies. The French Revolution and the spread of the anti-Christian cult of reason were the result of Jesuit, Masonic, and Illuminati influence. Jesuit professor Adam Weishaupt created the Order of the Illuminati in 1776 in Bavaria, Germany. These Illuminati were part of the coalition of rebels that became the Jacobins, the group responsible for the French Revolution. The French philosopher Voltaire, whose ideas were instrumental in the French Revolution, was a Freemason, as was Napoleon. Much more than a Freemason, François-Marie Voltaire-Arouet was a Jesuit-trained Roman Catholic who supposedly left the church, yet his efforts brilliantly advanced the devil's simulation for the Jesuits by taking the crimes of Catholicism and wrongly applying them to Christianity. The Catholic Church is far more in common with her predecessor, the Roman Empire, than with Christianity, and it was even prophesied to be so in the Christian Bible. The prophet Daniel had a vision of the four beasts, or empires, that would rule from his day forward, recounted in chapter 7 of the book of Daniel. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I watched until its wings were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Daniel 7:4. Babylon conquered with the ferocity of a lion and the swiftness of an eagle. Yet despite recounting Nebuchadnezzar's relationship with Yahweh in Daniel, it is a nation the Bible uses as a metaphor for all of man's rebellions against God. Another beast appeared, a second like a bear, and it raised itself up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And they said to it, Arise, devour much flesh. Daniel 7:5. The Medes and Persians allied together and quickly overthrew the empire of Lydia 546 BC before conquering Babylon in 539 BC and even bested Egypt 525 BC. At first the Medes led the coalition, but soon the Persians became stronger. After this I looked, and there was another, like a leopard, which has had on its back 4 wings of a fowl. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Daniel 7:6. Greece under Alexander overcame nations even faster than Babylon did. But in 323 BC, Alexander died suddenly at only 32 years of age. Numbers not lost on the Luciferians. Whether his age played a role in his death can not be known for sure, but Diodorus, Plutarch, Arrian, and Justin all entertained the notion that Alexander was murdered by poisoning. Upon his death, Greece was divided into 4 empires ruled by each of his most powerful generals: Lysimachus, Cassander, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. But it was the last beast that frightened Daniel the most. After this I saw in the visions at night a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and exceedingly strong. And it had a great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped the rest with its feet. And it was different from all other beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, when there came up among them another little horn, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And there in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Daniel 7:7-8, or 7-8. Rome was indeed a dreadful empire, but is there a dichotomy in this final beast? Do the 10 horns replaced by 1 speak of the suppression of the Roman Senate in favor of the emperor, or does this speak of the office of the papacy, or both? The teeth of iron are consistent with the dream Nebuchadnezzar had of the same 4 empires presaged as 4 metals that composed the statue of a giant man. The legs and feet of the statue were made of iron. Daniel 2 is a reference. But why do both visions end with the Roman Empire? Are these prophecies incomplete and useless to modern readers, or is Rome still completely, secretly in control? It is only within the last century that we even must ask this question, as Rome's control was a clear and present danger, not a secret. The Protestant historian Henry Catan Guinness felt it obvious and specifically referenced Daniel 7 in proving his point. Quoting Guinness, "It is important that we should clearly grasp one great historical fact. The rule of Rome has never, since it first commenced, ceased to exist, save once, for a very brief period during the Gothic invasions. It has changed in character, as we have seen, but it has continued. Rome ruled the known world at the first advent of Christ, and still rules hundreds of millions of mankind, and will continue to do so right up until the second advent of Christ. So this prophecy teaches, for not until the Son of Man takes the dominion of the earth and establishes a kingdom that shall never pass away, is the monster representing Roman rule destroyed. The rule of Rome, we repeat, has never ceased. It was a secular pagan power for 5 or 6 centuries. It has been an ecclesiastical and apostate Christian power ever since, that is to say, for 12 or 13 centuries. There lay a brief period between these two main stages during which professing Christian emperors ruled for Rome, followed by an interval when, for a time, it seemed as if the great city had received a fatal blow from her Gothic captors. The rule of Rome revived in a new form, and was as real under the popes of the 13th century as it had been under the Caesars of the first. It was as oppressive, cruel, and bloody under Innocent III as it had been under Nero and Domitian. The reality was the same, though the forms had changed. The reality was the same, though the forms had changed. The Caesars did not persecute the witnesses of Jesus more severely and bitterly than did the popes. Diocletian did not destroy the saints or oppose the gospel more than the Inquisition of papal days. Rome is one and the same all through, both locally and morally. One dreadful wild beast represents her, though the symbol, like the history it prefigures, has 2 parts. There was the undivided stage, and there has been the tenfold stage. The one is Rome pagan, the other Rome papal. The one is the old empire, the other the modern pontificate. The one is the empire of the Caesars, the other is the Roman papacy. Continuing, even the great boasts of the little horn correspond with depictions of this same office described in the book of Revelation. In fact, Revelation states that this final beast will have the traits of the previous 3 empires, the pagan beliefs of which have been retained by the Vatican. Reading, I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, with 10 crowns on his horns, and blasphemous names on his heads. The beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth was like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. I saw one of his heads as if it were mortally wounded, but his deadly wound was healed, and the whole world marveled and followed the beast. They worshipped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast? Who is able to wage war with him? He was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to wage war for 42 months. He opened his mouth to speak blasphemies against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and those who dwell in heaven. It was granted to him to wage war with the saints and to overcome them, and authority was given him over every tribe and tongue and nation. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, all whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain from the foundation of the world. Revelation 13:1-8. A beast in the Bible describes an empire. A woman describes a religious system. Rome is shockingly and accurately described as both. Jumping ahead, Cirucci quotes Heather McDougall from The Guardian, an article. The Sumerian goddess Inanna, or Ishtar, was hung naked on a stake and was subsequently resurrected and ascended from the underworld. One of the oldest resurrection myths is Egyptian Horus. Born on 25th December, Horus and his damaged eye became symbols of life and rebirth. Mithras was born on what we now call Christmas Day, and his followers celebrated the spring equinox. Even as late as the 4th century AD, the Sol Invictus associated with Mithras was the large, great pagan cult the church had overcome. Dionysus was a divine child resurrected by his grandmother. In an ironic twist, the Cybele cult flourished on today's Vatican Hill. Cybele's lover, Attis, was born of a virgin, died, and was reborn annually. This spring festival began as a day of blood on Black Friday, rising to a crescendo after 3 days. In rejoicing over the resurrection, there was a violent conflict on Vatican Hill in the early days of Christianity between the Jesus worshippers and pagans who quarreled over whose God was the true and whose the imitation. What is interesting to note here is that in the ancient... Let's try that again. What is interesting to note here is that the ancient world, wherever you had popular resurrected god myths, Christianity found lots of converts. So eventually, Christianity came to an accommodation with the pagan spring festival. Although we see no celebration of Easter in the New Testament, early church fathers celebrated it, and today many churches are offering sunrise services at Easter, an obvious pagan solar celebration. The date of Easter is not fixed, but instead is governed by the phases of the moon. How pagan is that? All the fun things about Easter are pagan. Bunnies are leftover from the pagan festival of Easter, a great northern goddess whose symbol was a rabbit or a hare. Exchange of eggs is an ancient custom celebrated by many cultures. Hot cross buns are very ancient too. In the Old Testament, we see the Israelites baking sweet buns for an idol, and religious leaders are trying to put a stop to it. The early church clergy also tried to put a stop to sacred cakes being baked at Easter. In the end, in the face of defiant cake-baking pagan women, they gave up and blessed the cake instead. And that's end of quote. Cirucci continues, Miss McDougall is either a criminally ignorant writer for one of England's most popular newspapers, or she's as cunning as Francois-Marie Voltaire Arouet, and on the same payroll. She has carefully rebranded all the misdeeds of Rome as Jesus-worshipping and Christian. For instance, the date of Easter was made to float because of the Gnostic calendar created by Jesuit Christopher Clavius. I know you're enjoying my reading, but before I get too far away from my original intent, let's define the devil's simulation. The malignant parasitic system of kingdoms and empires controlled by intelligent interdimensional evil. The pedocracy is the measure that initiates and ensures fealty to that system through the rape, torture, ritualistic slaughter, and even consumption of the innocent, of children. Is it out there? Let's add an example. Further in the book, Chapter 7, In Eaters of Children, by Johnny Cirucci. To commit, page 195, on Johnny Savile. Okay, this is one example. To commit to the devil's simulation is to be protected for your lifetime. After that, you're on your own. For those willing to defile the innocent in order to have access to power, a pattern emerges. Connections in government and law enforcement ensure free and unfettered access to the world's children with little fear of reprisal. Such was the case for Sir Jamie Savile. The earliest, and this is quoting a BBC article, the earliest known complaint about Savile dates from 1963, and it is one of 8 complaints that were never registered at the time they were made. This one occurred just after his television career was really beginning to take off. A male victim told his local police officer in Cheshire that Savile had raped him. He made the complaint the day after the assault. The officer told the victim to forget about it and that they should move on. The officer did not record a report of what the victim had said, and so there was no investigation into the DJ. There was a similar second incident, this time after the DJ had begun presenting Top of the Pops. A man told Metropolitan Police that his girlfriend had been assaulted during the recording of the program. An officer told him that he could be arrested for making such allegations. No report appears to have been logged. The HMIC says that, to its knowledge, complainants went to 3 other forces in England and Wales, Merseyside, and then the then Royal Ulster Constabulary and West Yorkshire, but failed to get police to take them seriously. The Police Service of Northern Ireland, the RUC's successor, says that it checked all records and could not find any report about Savile. End of article. A year later, an officer with the Metropolitan Police Service of London, headquartered at Scotland Yard, took a report that Savile had committed crimes at the Duncroft School for Emotionally Troubled Girls in Surrey. Again, no action was taken. The true story of what happened at Duncroft is beyond belief. Savile was directed there by pedophile powers and turned loose upon the girls interned in the government facility to rape and abuse at will. The young teenagers sent to the facility because they needed compassion, help, and safe haven were easy prey. They had only one barrier between them and Savile, the Duncroft staff, who all turned a blind eye. Savile abused, violated, and raped the girls in their rooms, in the intensive care infirmary, and even in the principal's office. He actually stayed the night on several occasions. It is not known if Savile had meals catered to each crime scene, but it's certainly plausible. Perhaps his ultimate show of arrogance was to write in the Duncroft visitor's log, "Called and fell in love with the doll. I wonder if it's legal to love 20 wives. If they're 12 years old and unwilling, one would think not." It was signed as Savile signed everything, with a smiley face in the J, a $sign for the S, and a pound for the L. But for Savile, it was about much more than money. Not only did he rape the teenage patients under government care with impunity, after his death, when it was safe to circulate victims' and complaints, remaining staff continued to live free of any interference by the law enforcement or the justice system, including headmistress Margaret Jones. From the Daily Mail. A woman who was abused at Duncroft at age 14 said she was furious that there are to be no charges. She said, "It's shameful. Teachers knew what that monster was doing." One former pupil, one of 3 girls photographed with the star in 1972, had said, "Jimmy treated Duncroft like a pedophile sweet shop." Also after Savile's death, the taxpayer-funded British Broadcasting Corporation conducted an independent media investigation into the accusations of child sex abuse. It cost £200,000, but the BBC decided to do nothing with the information it gleaned. When prompted to at least release the findings, the committee led by former Sky News head Nick Pollard refused. Outrage over these and many other unrestrained criminal activities forced Metro Police to initiate a special task force after Savile's death, of course, which they called Operation U-Tree. Even in this, the cops mocked the citizenry. The U-Tree was and is highly revered by Celt and Saxon pagans as representative of sex magic, fertility, regeneration, and immortality. Often trees with sacred groves are pruned, shaved, or hacked to increase phallic resemblance. I think that's a solid place to end this show, 3.1. I've been reading from Eaters of Children, The Pedocracy Exposed, How Access to Power is Granted Through the Rape, Torture, and Ritualistic Slaughter of the Innocent by Johnny Cirucci. I'm thinking of another filter to add to this list of filters in order to, I believe, properly see history as it has been presented, written and presented, recorded and presented to us. So far, the lenses and filters I've laid out are the extreme oath of obedience of the Jesuit order, the fourth vow, If you have not had the opportunity to read it, I will post a link in the show notes. I'm considering reading the oath, so it is also documented in audio form. So the extreme oath is one filter. We have the genocide as defined under the Convention of the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide as a second filter, redefined as killing members of a group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of a group, deliberately inflicting on a group or the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group or forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. And as a third filter, the pedocracy. Thank you for joining me. For Johnny, Doc Felipe, Eric, 777, Reply All George, and Greg the Graphics Guru, the Cirucci team, this is Hawkeye. And with unction and a call upon the name of Jesus. Join the army and fight this system. Stand up for what is right. Be empowered to do what is right. To call out and expose evil. Be protected, for Jesus will be your sword and your shield. He is faith. He is hope. He is love. This is Hawkeye. Ciao.